Hello, this is Jane, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the March 26th issue of the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And I'm going to start with a headline on the front page that says GO expansion project hits major speed bumps. Files show $27 billion project to modernize tracks has been delayed, scaled back. And this is by Andy Takagi. Metrolinx's promise of two-way, all-day GO service has been delayed, internal documents from the Provincial Transit Agency show. Meanwhile, under the reframed vision for what's known as GO expansion, some riders on the province's train system could find their trips getting slower, not faster. Announced in 2018 and originally meant to be done by 2032, the $27 billion GO expansion plan would have effectively transformed GO from a commuter railway into a European-style rapid rail system boasting 15 minutes or better service on core parts of the network. However, the documents obtained via a Freedom of Information, that's FOI, request made by the Ontario NDP and provided to the Star show a new proposed 10-year plan for GO expansion that seemingly acknowledges a decade delay in electrifying and modernizing the network. The 10-year plan drafted in March 2025 is a proposed plan for GO expansion created to update the Metrolinx Board of Directors. It outlines an electrified network with faster travel times on the Lakeshore West and East lines, but no electrification on the Stouffville, Kitchener, and Barrie lines. The Kitchener and Barrie lines could also have slower travel times, according to the proposed plan, because of additional stations. The Kitchener line has new stops at Mount Dennis, Woodbine, St. Clair, Old Weston, and Kitchener Central. The Barrie line is now expected to connect Innisfil to Caledonia Station on Line 5, St. Clair, Old Weston, Bloor, Lansdowne, and Spadina Front. Replacing diesel trains with electric ones can mean less pollution, better efficiency, and quicker stopping and starting at stations. Even when the benefits to the Lakeshore lines materialize, they will be later than promised. The electrification of the GO network was initially expected to finish by 2032. Now, according to the confidential Metrolinx documents, only partial electrification on two lines will be delivered within the next decade. In response to questions about the Freedom of Information documents, Metrolinx spokesperson Lindsay Miller said GO expansion is continuing, including service increases, signaling and electrification work, with the design and phasing of electrification for core segments of the GO network continuing to be developed. Miller pointed to completed works on twin rail tunnels under Highway 401 and 409, 4 new stations, upgrades at Union Station, grade separations, and station improvements as examples of work progressing on GO expansion. Dakota Brazier, a spokesperson for Transportation Minister Prabmeet Sarkaria, said the province is phasing our work to ensure we are building in a way that is practical and delivers real results for riders. Neither Brazier nor Miller provided a timeline of GO expansion. GO expansion, previously known as Regional Express Rail, is the province's single largest transit project and was launched under the Ontario Liberals. It has struggled to get off the ground since its announcement in 2018, according to two sources who worked on the project and spoke on condition of anonymity because they continue to work in the rail industry. The Ford government in 2019 renewed efforts to modernize the GO system, and in 2022 signed a public-private partnership, that's a P3, contract with a consortium of companies collectively known as On Express Transportation Partners. The group included Canadian construction company Aecon, French rail company Alstom, German state rail agency Deutsche Bahn, Spanish construction group Fomento de Construcciones y Contratas, and consulting firms WSP and Hatch. In 2020, private sector bidders warned Metrolinx and Infrastructure Ontario about the P3 model used for GO expansion, with concerns about how much financial risk they were being asked to take on. Those concerns were revealed in documents at the time, which warned that changing course could delay procurement for the expansion. Problems started soon after the contract was awarded to On Express in 2022. Deutsche Bahn, Aecon, and Metrolinx were at odds from the start, according to sources, and a clear-cut plan for the execution of GO expansion was never agreed upon. Both On Express and Metrolinx overpromised in their visions for GO expansion, said one GO expansion source with knowledge of the relationship between Metrolinx and the On Express consortium. That led to delays and the eventual termination of Deutsche Bahn and Aecon's 23-year operations and maintenance contract last year. I think Metrolinx came up with a business case that presented grand visions, but did not come up with clear execution plans, according to the source, adding that On Express was incentivized to promise a lot of service and promise great things. Another source who worked the On Express consortium described how after the P3 agreement started, almost immediately the partners disagreed on the way to deliver the Metrolinx requirements. When Deutsche Bahn and Aecon were dropped, it seemed to bring those concerns to life. According to the report in the Freedom of Information documents, an incremental process of restructuring due to commercial and financial challenges has transferred key program risks back to Metrolinx. The restructuring has created the need for Metrolinx to step in as the single integrator and guiding mind. While the physical, civil, and track work on the corridors is largely agreed, the signaling, electrification, and fleet still require development, the report says. Another reason for GO expansion's delay, according to the report, is the growing number of other Metrolinx projects. Besides the expansion, the Provincial Transit Agency is also building new GO stations, GO rail extensions for 4 lines, and the Ontario line, which will overlap with 3.2 kilometers of the GO network. Those additional projects introduced new construction complexities at critical sites or added demand pressure to compete for limited construction access on the railway, according to the report. Simultaneous progression of these programs has increased the number of interfacing projects, including state of good repair, triggered more intricate network planning, added pressure to the supply chain, expanded workforce management needs, and intensified safety oversight, the report authors added. Opposition parties at Queen's Park are calling for more transparency on the timeline for GO Expansion's rollout. Ontarians have no idea what is going on inside Metrolinx, how they're making decisions, or even what they have planned for these lines that people heavily rely on. NDP leader Marit Stiles said in a statement to the Star, "The only way to get any information from Metrolinx is through FOIs, that's Freedom of Informations. It's unacceptable." The Ontario Liberals echoed that sentiment, with MPP Andrea Hazel adding, "Ontario has nearly 16 million people, and most live outside Toronto, yet we continue to see a disproportionate focus on projects like the Lakeshore GO Line and the expansion of Billy Bishop Airport. Meanwhile, communities served by Kitchener, Stouffville, and Barrie are being pushed to the back of the line." And the next article from the front page is under the byline of Billy Bishop. Public will have input on airport, MPs say. City mulls legal options against provincial takeover. This is by Ryan Tumilty and Ben Cohen. Ottawa. As Doug Ford pushes to bring jets to Billy Bishop Airport, city councillors are eyeing legal action while federal Liberals promise the public will still have a say before any plan takes flight. Toronto councillors on Wednesday voted to ask the city solicitor to look into possible legal action against the province for taking over the city's role at the airport. Councillors also voted to formally express their displeasure with the province. On Monday, Ford announced plans to expand the airport and take over the City of Toronto's role in governing the property, arguing the expansion is long overdue. Ford went on to say this is necessary because of, quote, lefties, unquote, at City Hall who oppose building anything. While the federal government has indicated interest in the Premier's vision, several Liberal MPs on Parliament Hill Wednesday emphasized that any changes would need to involve local residents. Anything that happens at that airport will be done in consultation with the community, said Liberal MP James Maloney. He's Etobicoke and Lakeshore. The only difference, he acknowledged, is the municipal government is no longer getting a say. Liberal MPs Chi Nguyen, that's from Spaticoke Harbourfront, and Yvonne Baker, Etobicoke Centre, also affirmed their constituents will have input. The airport is governed by a tripartite arrangement between Ottawa, the city, and the Toronto Port Authority. Ford's move would displace Toronto's seat on the board and the city's ownership of some of the airport's land. In 2015, during a push for expansion, the then Trudeau government said it would not allow any changes to the agreement, scuttling a plan from Porter Airlines to add jets to the airport and expand the facility. This government should have a say, said Mayor Olivia Chow. This government is important. We have to be the voices of the people of Toronto. We cannot shirk our responsibility and let other levels of government deal with it. Councillor Osma Malik, whose ward of Spadina-Fort York covers the island airport, said she and her colleagues have worked tirelessly to make the area desirable to both live in and visit. All of our work to make the area vibrant and sustainable is under threat and at risk, said Malik in an impassioned speech at Council. We simply can't take the Premier's word that he has the City of Toronto's interests at heart. The province is telling us they don't care what we have to say. We demand a seat at the table. Also on Wednesday, Federal Transport Minister Stephen McKinnon said again the airport can help Toronto solve congestion in the skies. We have a lot of difficulties with respect to air travel in Toronto. We have congested airports, and we have an asset that is extremely valued by the people of Toronto, and that's Billy Bishop, he said. In a statement to the Star, McKinnon's office emphasized that any expansion will still need sign-off from all the players in the tripartite agreement. Several Liberal MPs, including people who first ran in 2015 when the Liberals opposed the airport expansion, emphasized it's not a done deal. Across the country, Transport Canada has ordered longer runway overrun areas at many airports, including Billy Bishop, and that work is expected to get underway this year. Under Ford's plan, the runway at Billy Bishop would have to be even longer to accommodate jets. In last year's federal budget, the government opened up the idea of longer-term leases for federal airports to attract more private sector investment or selling airports altogether. Most major airports in Canada are owned by the federal government and leased to local airport authorities who pay the government rent. Billy Bishop is owned by the Toronto Port Authority, with a private firm operating the terminal. McKinnon's office said it's an example of how the private sector can be involved. And I need to pause here to remind you you're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The next article, also from the front page, is under the byline of immigration. Her residency application was denied, citing information AI hallucinated about her job. And this is by Nicholas Keung. Kemi Ade was shocked by the immigration refusal letter she received. In rejecting her permanent residence application, the Immigration Department cited her current job duties, which included wiring and assembling control circuits, building control and robot panels, programming and troubleshooting. The department said these duties didn't match the Canadian work experience she claimed. Well, no, they didn't. Ade is a postdoctoral research fellow and guest teacher at McMaster University, and those skills are not part of her repertoire, nor are they what she submitted in her immigration application a year ago. I saw this language about this job description that had nothing to do with me, said the health scientist from France, who has a PhD from Sorbonne University in the immunology of aging. I was disoriented how this could happen. But a disclaimer at the bottom of the refusal letter might provide a hint. It's believed to be the first time that the department explicitly referred to the use of generative AI to support application processing in immigration refusals. The disclaimer also noted that all generated content was verified by an officer and that generative AI was not used to make or recommend a decision. While hailing the disclosure itself as a positive step, critics say they're alarmed by the use of generative AI in assessing economic immigration applications that are often more sophisticated and nuanced, and how it may lead to chaos and loss of public confidence in the system. Unlike traditional AI, which classifies and makes predictions based on existing data and predefined rules, generative AI proactively applies learned patterns to synthesize information and is capable of creating new content. Remember how when you put stuff into ChatGPT, it hallucinates, said Toronto immigration lawyer Zainab Zayi, a co-founder of AI Monitor for immigration in Canada and internationally. You give it a prompt and it can use its large language models to create that response for you and build on what your prompt is to give you a refusal letter. Or it could give you on the same prompt an acceptance. The challenge is it's a black box because you don't know exactly how it's going to get to its final determination. The fact that the generated codified by the human officer has raised, content of Ade's refusal has been verified by the human officer on raised further concerns. I cannot comprehend how any human being could make this decision, said Ade's lawyer, Luca Vukolek. Somehow it hallucinated my client's job description. I would love to see what the officer saw. Something seriously went wrong here. Ade's refusal came in late February, just as the Immigration Department published its first AI strategy, outlining how officials will use artificial intelligence to boost efficiency, enhance service delivery, and strengthen program integrity. The department said officials have been using digital tools, including advanced analytics and automation, since 2013 to facilitate faster and more consistent services and assist in program integrity. These tools help flag indicators of fraud and triage applications, among other tasks. It said officials are currently experimenting with publicly available Gen AI tools to help with brainstorming, research, summarizing, and analyzing information, and in-house Gen AI tools that can, for example, help with research. In response to Ade's case, the department maintained the decision was made by a human officer and Gen AI played no role in the decision-making process. McGill University law professor Jennifer Rasso is an expert on digital government and public administration, whose research examines how frontline decision makers interact with digital tools. While reducing backlogs, currently about 1 million permanent and temporary immigration applications exceed service standards, and speeding up processing are important, she said, there's a real danger on relying on these tools rather than investing in a strong civil service. The rules applied by digital tools are often cloaked in secrecy because government officials fear releasing the information will help people game the system. That's a problem because people need to know how their applications are going to be assessed, said Rasso. At what point was Gen AI used, she said. Are we talking about summarizing documents? Does the officer look at those original documents at all? Are those documents translated by Gen AI or not? These are big questions. Generative AI tools are not really great at summarizing. Of course, you might want to know what Gen AI tools are we talking about. The Immigration Department did not respond to the STAR's questions on what Gen AI tools they use, how they are being used in supporting application processing, and what it's tasked to do, and what an officer's verification involves. Rasso said these tools can create more work for decision makers because they are not designed for the task and produce errors regularly. And it's up to the humans to examine, not rubber stamp, what generative AI has produced. Thinking about machine learning and the potential for improvement of these systems, you also need people who are doing this work of reviewing, cross-referencing, and adjusting the systems, said Rasso. Judges have been hesitant to push the government for disclosure on the digital tools they use or make any pronouncement about it, said Zayi. They know the consequence, she said. If they come and say these should not be used, then does that impact all the prior decisions that have been made with this technology? It becomes a huge mess. But for every bad decision, there's a person affected, said Ade, who came to Canada in 2023 with her family on a work permit. They have to put a process in place to make sure that the decision is made fairly, said Ade, who blames both AI and the person who reviewed the decision. They cannot just trust tools like this to make such big decisions that will change people's lives like this. I cannot be very confident in the system now. Ade's lawyer has requested that the Immigration Department reconsider her refusal, and the file has been reopened. And I think this is the last article from the first page. It's under the byline of Star Investigation. Veterans Affairs orders probe into rehab firm. Independent review to address concerns of inadequate care, threats to benefits. And this is by Frederick Plant. Minister of Veterans Affairs Jill McKnight said her department will launch a review of its rehabilitation program and the company running it. McKnight announced the review Wednesday during her opening remarks in front of the Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs as part of its ongoing study of the program. The National Rehabilitation Program is administered by Partners in Canadian Veterans Rehabilitation Services, that's PCVRS, through a $573 million contract with Ottawa. The contract is up for extension at the end of this year. With the contract approaching the end of its initial 5.5-year term, I have instructed my department to conduct an independent review of the rehabilitation program and PCVRS, McKnight told the committee. Her announcement follows a STAR investigation that found participants in Veterans Affairs Canada's, that's VAC, rehabilitation program are drowning in bureaucracy, being forced to change service providers, given inadequate care, and facing threats to their benefits. Veterans said their health worsened as a result. McKnight said she did not know yet who would lead the review, nor has a timeline been set. She said it was triggered by an opportunity for growth and improvement. The PCVRS contract was supposed to be evaluated in 2024-25 to assess efficiencies gained, but that review never took place. An evaluation at this stage would be premature, VAC said in February. During another committee meeting on Monday, VAC officials and PCVRS executives acknowledged the serious and concerning issues raised by the STAR's reporting. A senior VAC official said the department would follow up with affected veterans. The committee's vice chairs told the STAR before Wednesday's meeting that this response was inadequate. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a major wound, right? It's not enough. Blake Richards, a Conservative MP for Airdrie Cochrane in Alberta. The 30 veterans and 11 healthcare professionals who were interviewed for the STAR's investigation are indicative of hundreds, probably thousands, of other veterans who are dealing with the same kind of problems, he said. 1 in 6 veterans suffers from PTSD, according to the 2022 Canadian Veteran Health Survey, a rate 5 times greater than the general population. Veterans are also more likely to report back problems, arthritis, anxiety, and mood disorders. Nearly half of them live with pain. PCVRS and VAC have serious shortcomings regarding the rehabilitation program. Marie-Hélène Gaudreau, a Bloc Québécois MP for Laurentides-Labelle, this absolutely needs to be corrected. PCVRS is a joint venture between WCG Services, a subsidiary of an Australian corporation, and Lifemark Health Group, a North York-based network of clinics owned by Loblaw Companies Limited. Neither PCVRS, WCG, Lifemark, nor Loblaw immediately answered the STAR's request for comment on the review. VAC officials and company executives defended the program during this week's hearings. The program is not entirely broken, McKnight said Wednesday. There are veterans that are having successful experiences, and there are veterans for whom the experience can be better. Sonia Lockyer, the president and CEO of Lifemark, said Monday that 74% of participants are reporting good functional gains from the program. That's actually industry standard. VAC spokesperson Marc Lescouture clarified that those participants who reported improvement in at least one key outcome area, such as functional capacity or overall health and well-being. This result comes from surveys filed by 732 participants, Lescouture said, and represents a small fraction of the nearly 23,000 veterans and their families that VAC said have been supported by PCVRS since 2023. Completion of outcome measure assessments is voluntary and depends on a participant's readiness and ability to engage, which may be impacted by health challenges, Lescoutre said. Despite the smaller sample size, the results remain valid and meaningful. Nishika Jardine, the Veterans Ombud, also testified in front of the committee Wednesday and shared concerns about VAC's rehabilitation program. I have heard numerous informal complaints about PCVRS, both from veterans and from mental health treatment providers, Jardine said. Veterans primarily complain about communication issues or delays that lead to confusion about next steps, timelines, program requirements, or the poor communication skills of some PCVRS staff, along with the volume of assessments they are asked to undertake. Veterans are also being asked to retell the story of their trauma to multiple different assessors, even though that information is readily available in their file, the Ombud said. Her office received 100 formal complaints about the rehabilitation program since the implementation of the PCVRS contract in 2022, she said, most of which were referred back to the department. In 6 cases, she said her office found unfairness but did not find evidence of underlying systemic issues. And I need to pause once more here to remind you that you're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The next article is titled Air Canada CEO Slammed for English-Only Condolences. Carney says Rousseau lacked judgment as message upsets Francophones. This is by Alex Ballingall. Prime Minister Mark Carney laid into the chief executive of Air Canada on Wednesday, accusing him of a lack of judgment and compassion as a furor erupted in Quebec over his English-only condolences for the pilots killed in the LaGuardia airport crash. But Quebec separatist leaders accusing Carney of failing to understand and respect the Francophone nation that they insist should stand on its own outside the federalist vision of a bilingual and multicultural Canada. On Wednesday, Carney weighed in on the controversy and argued the head of the national airline should express himself in Canada's 2 official languages. We live proudly in a bilingual country, Carney said in French. I am so disappointed by the video message of the Air Canada CEO. He lacks judgment and compassion. The video saw Air Canada CEO Michael Rousseau express his sadness over the crash, which involved an Air Canada Jazz flight from Montreal striking a fire truck on the LaGuardia airport runway. Both pilots, Antoine Faure and Mackenzie Gunther died in the collision. But the lack of French struck a nerve in Quebec as commentators and politicians voiced outrage that Rousseau, who had previously been criticized for his lack of French as head of a major company headquartered in Montreal, spoke only in English. Spokespeople for Air Canada did not respond to the Star's request for comment. Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet slammed Carney for not going far enough in his criticism of Rousseau and called for the CEO to resign. Quebec area Tory MP Joël Godin alleged the CEO has shown us once again that he has no sensitivity and no respect for francophones. Conservative MP Eric Lefaux praised Carney for calling out Rousseau, saying the message was unacceptable given that a Quebecer was among those killed. But on Wednesday, the Carney government also faced scrutiny over the place of French in his office. Radio-Canada reported that none of the speech writers for the Prime Minister are Francophone. If Carney had the will and the intention, he would surround himself with people who understand the reality of French speakers everywhere in Canada. Procurement Minister Joël Lightbound, who is Carney's Quebec lieutenant in cabinet, responded that he is not at all concerned about French in the Prime Minister's office. In January, Carney hosted a cabinet meeting in the Citadel adjoining the Plains of Abraham. He delivered a speech professing the virtues of Canadian coexistence that he argued stretched back to the aftermath of the British conquest of New France in 1759, which he said set the stage for the French-English character of what became Canada. On Wednesday, the Bloc leader referenced that speech as an example of how Carney doesn't understand or respect the Quebec nation. He doesn't have a grand understanding of the language of the Francophone community. He has his speeches written by people who don't speak French. He came to the Citadel of Quebec to pronounce a speech in which he essentially said that it was a damn good thing that the French of the era were conquered, Blanchet said. The next article is titled Black Creek Flood Project Gets Rework. Outside engineer raised doubts about the city's $295 million plan. And this is by Anastasia Blasser. The city is recalculating its flood model for the Black Creek runoff channel in one of Toronto's most at-risk neighborhoods, as residents and an independent engineer question whether the $295 million plan can even meet its core goal. The project aims to reduce chronic flooding in the Rockcliffe-Smythe neighborhood, where homes have been repeatedly damaged by rising water. Construction has begun on bridge work at Jane Street and Scarlett Road, key bottlenecks, the city says, while broader channel improvements, which could better reduce flooding, are years away. Questions about the accuracy of flood computer modeling have left some residents uncertain whether the plan will deliver. Some fear it will fall short of its promises, while others worry delays could carry their own risks. Independent engineer Tim Meru, working alongside the Black Creek Flood Coalition, said the plan has a fundamental technical issue after reviewing its environmental assessment, which he concluded relied on inaccurate modeling. They came up with a $200 million solution that won't work, Meru said. He said the current design would provide little to no benefit for as many as 90% of the residents it is intended to help. Meru said the model used in the environmental assessment reduced friction in parts of the concrete channel, making the system appear capable of handling larger floods than it actually can. If the modeling is flawed, he added, efforts to improve the capacity of concrete waterways could still leave much of the neighborhood at risk. Meru met with city officials, including Chief Engineer Jennifer Graham Harkness, on March 12 and gave a 45-minute presentation on his analysis. He said Harkness was receptive and assured him the city will do the right thing when the design consultant revises the modeling. In conversations with the Star, the city said re-examining the model was always part of the plan, and any new findings would inform the detailed design. The project's preliminary design will not be revisited. It remains unclear what would happen if updated modeling confirms Moreau's concerns. Both the city and the Toronto and Region Conservative Authority, that's the TRCA, acknowledged the project will not eliminate flooding, an impossible task to promise, but says it will improve conditions. This work is about protecting the community by giving water more room to move through the system, Harkness said. We're confident this is the most effective way to help protect homes from flooding. Resident and member of the Black Creek Flood Coalition, Sarah McVie, said she was relieved Meru was able to present his findings, but still finds the situation very concerning and confusing. I am frustrated that us residents, the very people who are meant to be served by the project, have been left out, she said. McVie wants the city to explain why Meru's findings are not a concern, if that is the case, and to restore public confidence. Please reassure us that this project will not stop, McVie said. If we could have a public acknowledgement that they are committed to saving our lives, that would be nice. She said residents' concerns were not taken seriously in 2024 and questioned why emails went unanswered, meetings were delayed, and a promised final public consultation never happened. They have a duty of care, McVie said. From my perspective, that duty of care has not been met over the last few decades and certainly isn't being met right now. The experience has left her fearful and frustrated with what she perceives as a broken system. It's torture, and of course, people feel demoralized, she said. This is how apathy and hopelessness pervades. Matthew Zaffino is among the residents willing to move ahead with the plan, even if it means marginal relief. He has been waiting for the flooding to be addressed since he moved near Lavender Creek 5 years ago. He said addressing flood risk must be a priority, warning that delays could have deadly consequences. If the number's bad, the number's bad, Zaffino said. We don't make society more prosperous by replacing 2 feet of drywall at the bottom of basements for 1,000 people once every 2 years. That's not a way of prosperity. That's just stupid. And the next article is titled Supervised Consumption Sites. 6 ex-mayors criticize PC's defunding edict. Letter to Premier Health Minister points to higher public spending without positive impacts. And before I read this article, I just need to remind you very quickly, you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And now I'm back to the article titled 6 ex-mayors Criticize PC's Defunding Edict. And this is by Omar Mosley. Toronto's former mayors have joined forces to urge the provincial government to reconsider defunding supervised consumption sites. In a letter sent to Premier Doug Ford and Minister of Health Sylvia Jones on Tuesday night, former mayors David Crombie, Art Eggleton, Barbara Hall, David Miller, John Sewell, and John Tory said the decision to close supervised consumption sites nearly a year ago has caused much physical harm and death and have resulted in increased public expenditures without resulting in any positive impacts. Last year, the province ordered the closure of 10 supervised consumption sites across Ontario, including 5 in Toronto, as provincial legislation prohibited them from operating within 200 meters of schools and daycares. One site in Kensington Market remained open due to an injunction granted as part of a court challenge, while another in Parkdale closed in November, with the province citing crime and safety concerns. The government plans to defund the remaining 7 sites in Ontario, including 2 in Toronto. The mayors pointed to numbers compiled by drug policy experts Gillian Cola with Memorial University and Tara Gomes with the University of Toronto. The numbers show EMS calls for opioid-related overdoses rose by 69% across Ontario since the closures in April 2025. And then in parentheses, it says 604 calls in the first quarter of 2025 to 1,024 calls in the third quarter. And then it goes on, according to data from the Ontario Drug Policy Research Network. Province-wise, emergency department visits for opioid-related toxicities are up 67% from 608 visits in March 2025 to 1,015 visits in September 2025, according to Public Health Ontario numbers. At a media availability on Wednesday, Jones emphatically rejected the idea of reconsidering the province's plan to move away from harm reduction services. We're not going to reverse it, Jones said. We've been very clear. Our focus is on the HART hubs, that's H-A-R-T, hubs, to make sure that people have access to treatment. HART hubs were introduced as part of the government's new model focused on getting people into housing and treatment, but they've been criticized for being slow to take off and removing a service that kept people alive until they're ready to enter treatment. NDP leader Marit Stiles told reporters Wednesday that HART hubs are not up and running, and the ones that are still aren't offering the full slate of services the province promised. Taking away supports and programs without replacing them with anything else comparable is a real problem, and that's what we're seeing across the province, Stiles said. In their letter, the former mayors emphasized the sites must be properly run to minimize impact on surrounding neighborhoods and that they're not a means to an end. We recognize that sites are not a standalone solution to the overdose crisis or substance abuse, but they are a critical component of a comprehensive, evidence-based system of care, they wrote. Removing them from Ontario does not improve anyone's health or make anyone safer. And the next article is titled, Ford Says HST Break Will Boost Housing Starts. Tax relief expected to add 21,000 jobs, generate $2.7 billion. And this is by Robert Benzie. Ottawa and Queen's Park are giving a $2.2 billion shot in the arm to Ontario's sputtering home construction industry, with a one-year break on the HST for buyers of new houses and condos. At first disclosed by the Star, Prime Minister Mark Carney and Premier Doug Ford will exempt the 13% harmonized sales tax for 1 year on all new homes worth $1 million or less. It is an expansion of the existing rebate introduced last fall that was only available to first-time buyers of new homes and will be a cornerstone pledge in Provincial Finance Minister Peter Bethlenfalvy's budget Thursday. At a Mississauga construction site Wednesday, Ford said The move should result in 8,000 additional housing starts this year, an increase of around 12% over the new homes begun in 2025, and boost a provincial economy suffering from U.S. President Donald Trump's trade war against Canada. Prime Minister Carney is a great partner, and I just appreciate him doing this, enthused the progressive conservative premier of his liberal counterpart. He's a good man, he's a smart businessman, he's out building relationships around the world, Ford said of the globe-trotting Prime Minister. He's back and he's going to be kicking some butt there. In Ottawa, Federal Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne told the Star the government would soon table a bill on the measure. Housing is always a priority for us, said Champagne. We work well with provinces and will be tabling legislation very soon. It is hoped the temporary relief will create 21,000 construction jobs, critical in a sector that has been hurting for months, and generate $2.7 billion in economic growth. The new tax rebate maxes out at $130,000 for homes costing between $1 million and $1.5 million, and then gradually drops to $24,000 at the $1.85 million threshold. That $24,000 rebate has been on the books for the past 15 years or so, available for both owner-occupied primary residences and residential rental properties. Purchase agreements must be signed between next Wednesday and March 31, 2027. Construction for primary residences has to begin by December 31, 2028, and must be substantially completed by December 31, 2031. For rental units, the deadline for completion is 2 years earlier, December 31, 2029, due to a glut of vacant residential properties languishing on the market. Ottawa is giving Ontario $875 million to cover the federal 5% share of the HST, while Queen's Park is paying out nearly $1.4 billion, meaning the tax relief package is worth about $2.2 billion. Bethlen Falvey, who is tabling the budget in the legislature at 4 p.m. on Thursday, said the rebate is an acknowledgement affordability concerns are top of mind throughout the province. We know families in Ontario are feeling uncertain and have seen higher prices on everyday items as a result of ongoing global economic turmoil, said the treasurer. At Queen's Park, where opposition parties have long implored Ford to bring relief to homebuyers, NDP leader Marit Stiles says she was cautiously optimistic about a change her party has long urged. Obviously, we need some affordability measures. I hope that the Premier will do more than that in the budget tomorrow, said Stiles, noting absolutely nothing that this government has done has built a single home. Liberal MPP Adil Shamji, that's Don Valley East, said it's an idea that we've been calling for months now. As the Ford government has dragged their heels, all they've done is fallen further and further behind their own targets to build 150,000 homes a year and 1.5 million by 2031, said Shamji. Green MPP Aislinn Clancy, it's Kitchener Centre, said the Tories need to improve zoning and reduce other red tape that municipalities face to get housing built. The Premier has some sort of allergic reaction to fourplexes, but we know that we need more than just a tall and sprawl. We need to build infill, and we know that this is the most affordable, fastest way to get new units online, and they're just not doing it, said Clancy. The existing federal first-time buyers rebate applies to houses purchased from a builder where the agreement was entered into between last March 20 and before 2031. Construction of eligible homes must be mostly finished before 2036, while the provincial refund is for those made between last May 27 and before 2031, also with completion by 2036. I can only fit in one more short article, and that is Man Who Died Saving Woman to be Honored by Justin Ball. A Toronto man will be honored for his bravery after sacrificing his life trying to rescue a woman and her 7-year-old son from a house fire 5 years ago. The Star of Courage will be awarded to Matthew Ziball's family on his behalf during a ceremony at Ottawa's Rideau Hall on Thursday. The award, created in 1972, recognizes acts of conspicuous courage in circumstances of great peril. Zibald woke up to find the house in flames, and he alerted other residents before barely making it out himself. When he heard frantic screams coming from inside the residence, he rushed back inside. The 7-year-old boy, his grandmother, and a family friend died in the fire. The child's mother survived. Adam Atala of Mississauga will also receive a Medal of Bravery for his courage during a house fire in 2022. A Fort Erie, Ontario woman who saved 2 boys from drowning in 2022 will also be honored, in addition to a Kitchener woman who rescued 2 people from a rip current in 2020. Several British Columbia residents will be also honored for disarming a gunman who shot at parishioners in Solemn Arm, British Columbia in 2019. And I'm going to end here with, you've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the March 26th issue of the Toronto Star. Your reader has been Jane. Thank you for listening.